Have you ever wondered if the fight between Robert and Rhaegar Targaryen could have ended any other way? Well, I'm in armor and I'm in a disgusting pond water. Let's figure out just how easy or difficult it is to actually move around in this stuff. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Screen Tested, and today we are going to be doing something very fun. I am in my armor. We have some water behind us, some disgusting pond water that I may be getting into very soon. Anyway, what we're going to be talking about and looking at specifically is the battle between Robert Baratheon and Rhaegar Targaryen at the Trident. Now, this is very interesting to me because obviously in the original text, it's, in my opinion, a little bit up to interpretation, and I believe that is why there has been so many artistic depictions of them on foot in the water. However, if we're sticking technically to the book, it does kind of say they're on their war horses, but again, there's just really not much detail there. So this is why I'm saying this, because obviously the contextual part here is if they're on their horses, pretty much everything we're going to talk about in today's episode doesn't matter. Let's get started. First, we should start off with, I guess, his weapon type, right? Rhaegar Targaryen is using something akin to a longsword. Now, a longsword isn't necessarily, useless against armor. However, you have to kind of, get close and get in the gaps, all that sort of stuff. Whereas Robert Baratheon, I believe he is using a warhammer, something similar. Essentially, something really, really good for smashing in armor, which is what happens in the end, right? Spoiler alert. Funny fact, this particular breastplate that I'm currently wearing is a project. If you guys have watched before, I did a full project restoring it because I took a Bector Corbin to it and completely caved it in and absolutely destroyed this very particular breastplate, which is very reminiscent of obviously what happens to Rhaegar, right? Now, obviously my breastplate is a little bit more munitions grade, right? It isn't really fit for a prince, which would probably have like hardened steel. However, I do find it interesting nonetheless. Now, why does this matter? Because obviously they are in the water, depending on the depth, of course. It means that the first thing to go once you get into that water is your footwork. Actually being able to move the blade, I'll stand on this side, actually being able to move the blade, right, is going to be like, if I'm fighting someone who has a different weapon type, my agility is allowing me to keep my measure and my distance, whereas the moment that the water starts to hamper that, I'm actually going to be essentially heavy-footed and not being able to move, which means someone like Robert, who just needs to hit him one time in the chest, is essentially going to kill him. Whereas Rhaegar is going to have to try, and if he wants to obviously get in the gaps of armor, he's going to have to get up close and personal and obviously try and half sword with him, because anything else he's going to do is not necessarily going to be, I would say, the best strategy, right? Next up, let's talk about the field of battle. Yes, the environment itself. Because obviously in a pond such as this, it's going to be a lot more muddy. There's not really a water current, so I don't really need to worry about obviously oncoming water, things like that. It's still going to be incredibly difficult and, like dumb, right? But being in something like a river that is flowing is much, much worse, because the water current, you obviously have large stones and rocks beneath your feet that obviously you can slip on and fall over, and that's not even including any of the mud that you might sink into and obviously stops you from being able to move, and obviously your footwork, right? So the terrain underneath your feet is absolutely terrible, and especially for this sort of combat, full armored combat. So there are a couple of other factors that we should mention, and that is obviously a trained warrior. Not even just a trained warrior. Anybody who has any modicum of training knows that obviously when you find yourself in a combat scenario, situation, whatever it may be, there's a couple of different factors that I would say subconsciously you are consistently aware of, and that is like points of egress. How can I essentially retreat? How can I back away from this situation? Additionally, your environment plays a huge, huge factor. And the moment that you're stuck in quicksand, or you fall into water or a lake or whatever it may be, immediately you snap and know, I need to remove myself from this situation, especially if it puts me at a huge disadvantage. So context around your environment and how you react is really, really important. And essentially why I bring this up is because obviously if you had someone like Rhaegar, who is obviously a very, very skilled knight, the moment that he fell off his warhorse, if he did, he would essentially make his way to the riverbank out of the water. I just don't see any situation where I'm fighting someone like Robert Baratheon, who is very, very strong, very, very powerful, especially with a weapon that is essentially going to my armor up that I would elect to stay and fight him. Anyway, so what do the books say specifically about this particular battle? They met amidst the shallows of the ford. The two knights fought valiantly upon their destriers, basically war horses, according to all accounts, for despite his crimes, Prince Rhaegar was no coward. Lord Robert was wounded by the Dragon Prince in combat, yet in the end, Baratheon's ferocious strength and his thirst to avenge the shame brought upon his stolen betrothed proved the greater. His warhammer found its mark, and Robert drove the spike through Rhaegar's chest, scattering the costly rubies blazed upon the prince's breastplate. So, like it says here, right, the warhammer found its mark, but it doesn't necessarily say if they were still on the horses. It's literally just one or two lines. So obviously there is that caveat that in the book it does say they're on the war horses, and then eventually he was able to hit him, but it doesn't necessarily say he was on the war horse while he did it. It was just so, in my opinion, open to interpretation. But I'm sure people will disagree with me in the comments. All right, with that being said, let's go get in the disgusting water right there. I'm gonna... Ah yes, disgusting water. My favorite. Feet depth. That's literally just my feet. Just the feet. And it is essentially like soft. That's how I'm gonna describe it. Because essentially, I've got a little bit of movement, right? Like I reckon if, you know, you got a little bit of adrenaline going, you're fighting, yeah, you can move quick enough at obviously foot depth. But I want to make it very clear, this is incredibly sticky and very suctiony. At this particular depth, meaning just past the ankles coming up to the shins, you've basically got, you can still move, right? It's laborious, it's difficult because I'm sinking into the mud quite a lot and it's holding me in place, but generally speaking, you can still move, right? We step back further though. I would say about halfway up the shins. This is where it becomes way more, right, like precarious, right? Because at this point, you're very slow. Your dexterity has pretty much been compromised at this point. If you're enjoying today's episode, you really should consider subscribing. It helps out the channel and I'd really appreciate it. All right, let's get back to today's episode. Very slippery. You want to topple over very quickly and easily. This is essentially where if I went any further, you're essentially f***ed, right? Not only because obviously this is a pond, so this gets really deep really quickly. Like I can't go any deeper than this or else we're gonna start sliding down into the depths. But this is kind of where I think the max that obviously the artistic depictions show, right? Like I don't think any deeper than this is what we see in any of, you know, the artwork, right? Fighting like this, man, is a slippery motherfucker. Okay. Yeah, we can't go any deeper. Like this is kind of where I'm maxing out. And remember, I'm focusing all of my sheer willpower on not slipping over. You try to retreat back, that's how far you move. Basically nothing. And remember, trying to keep your footing at the same time as some, you know, giant Hulk is swinging a warhammer at your breastplate, you're at such a disadvantage. So do I think that Rhaegar would essentially just be the moment he's in the water? Mostly yes, but obviously there is, like, I would say a reasonable technique, and it's a two-way street, double-edged sword if you will. And that is obviously if you're able to physically push your opponent into the water, if they are in full gear like this, I don't think that I would be able to get up. Period. I think that I'd probably drown if I couldn't crawl my way to the bank. Now obviously in full armor you can get back up if you fall down. However, it's very different when you fall into water where you immediately start drowning. Somebody's actively trying to hold you down or kill you, and especially someone who's as strong as Robert. Very different scenario. If Rhaegar was to maybe, you know, deflect some blows, maybe get a good shot in, and then, I don't know, bring Robert down so that he's able to fall into the water, and then once he's obviously fallen into the water, either let him drown or, you know, finish him off, I do think that that would be a sound technique. At least that's the technique that I would try to employ in that particular situation, right? But apart from that, trying to stand toe to toe with Robert with a sword, like a dexterity weapon, when essentially all of your dexterity has been robbed from you, especially in your lower half of your body, I think that is quite literally just a death sentence for Rhaegar the moment he's in the water. Like that, there's something that's super slippery right here, and I keep slipping on it. Holy fuck. I don't know what the fuck that is, like a giant scum stone. See that? I'm slipping over, holy shit. So now that we're out of that freezing cold water, there was a couple of points that I did want to mention. First and foremost, I nearly fell over like 4 times, and that is in a completely low pressure, no high stakes environment. We're literally just talking about, you know, me talking to you guys and moving around a bit, and I nearly fell over 4 times. So imagine how much different it would be, obviously, with a bunch of adrenaline in the middle of a battlefield, and it is life or death. That footing is absolutely insane, to put it mildly. I also thought a frame of reference between obviously being on dry land versus in the water would show you guys how different essentially these two environments are, and how they actually impact your speed and your movement and all that sort of stuff. Now, all of this, of course, is predicated on the you know, the assumption that the killing blow was delivered in the water, you know, on foot rather than on their war horses. I know people are going to be commenting about what's canon, what's not, what's in the books, what's not. I know. There just isn't that much information, and in my opinion, and I would even say in the opinion of a lot of artists, because they always depict it that way, it seems like the killing blow could have been delivered on foot. All right, I've said my piece. Thank you guys for watching. I genuinely hope you enjoyed, and as always, I'll see you next week in another episode. Have a good one.